organisms have managed to adapt to thrive in almost every environment on the planet. Some, however, have done this in a way that makes them look absolutely spectacular. So prepare yourself for the cutest, most colorful, and unbelievably adorable species on Earth as we take a look at the 15 most beautiful animals. Number 15. Resplendent Quetzal. Native to forest regions across Mexico, Guatemala, and Panama, the resplendent quetzal is undoubtedly one of the most beautiful species of bird in the world, and not even the name lives up to how stunning a creature it is. Usually growing to around 16 inches long, as well as having tail streamers that can be as much as 30 inches long, they have mainly iridescent green bodies, with a wide variety of other colors speckled throughout. Because of the size of their tails, they aren't particularly good at flying, so are more often seen hopping along branches in search of insects and fruit to feed on. They do, however, spend most of their lives high up in the tree canopy and can fly for short bursts if needed. Due to the way they look, resplendent quetzals have long been an integral part of culture and folklore in the area, so much so that they're the national birds of Guatemala, where the currency is named after them, and they also feature on the country's flag and coat of arms. In Mesoamerican cultures, the resplendent quetzal was considered a divine bird that was linked with the snake god, Quetzalcoatl, and it was seen as a heinous crime to be responsible for killing one. Still, that hasn't prevented collectors from taking large numbers in recent decades, which, along with habitat destruction, means that this incredible species is now considered to be near threatened. Number 14. Arctic Fox. Growing up to 30 inches long, the Arctic fox is one of the smaller species of fox, but because of the environment it lives, it has developed some of the most stunning features of any canine. They're found throughout the Arctic, where they hunt small creatures they encounter, such as lemmings, seal pups, fish, and birds, and also eat vegetation like berries and seaweed. To survive in such a cold environment, they grow thick, warm coats that are almost perfectly white to help them camouflage in with their surroundings. Even their fur doesn't protect them fully from the cold, however, so they build their dens in sheltered spots and are able to curl up into tiny balls, with their feet and heads tucked in beneath their bodies and tails to keep as much warmth in as possible. Such is their suitability to this climate and the fact they only start shivering once temperatures have plummeted to below -94 degrees Fahrenheit, they're the only land mammal native to Iceland, but the lack of food available means that most individuals don't survive past their first year. Still, they are one of the only Arctic species to not currently be deemed at risk of extinction, and with hundreds of thousands of them still thought to be in the wild, this is a species that'll still be around for a long time. Number 13. Orchid Mantis. Mantises are some of the most unusual-looking insects in the world, and there's one known as the orchid mantis that looks and behaves so similar to the plant that it's named after a simply stunning creature. Found in rainforests across Southeast Asia in countries like Malaysia, Thailand, and Indonesia, the four legs that they use for walking have purposefully evolved to mimic the petals of the flowers. Amazingly, they're able to alter their color from shades of light pink to dark brown, depending on the environment they live in. But while their camouflage may be particularly beautiful, it's not a defensive tactic for them, but an offensive one. They'll climb up plant stems until they reach a part with a flower, and then will hold on tight so they sway with the leaves. Soon enough, flies and insects such as butterflies will swoop in thinking they'll be able to feed on the nectar, but instead the mantis strikes with its toothed arms, delivers a powerful bite, and then devours it in a flash before returning to the plant to attract its next victim. Because of the way they look, orchid mantises are one of the most sought-after species of insects by collectors, but because they're so rare and are extremely difficult to find, they're usually sold for many thousands of dollars each, although it would of course be best to leave them in the wild as nature intended. Number 12. Clouded Leopard. All big cat species are beautiful in their own way, but if there's one that stands out above the rest, it's the clouded leopard, which is native to regions around the Himalayas in Southeast Asia and China. Usually growing to around 3 or 4 feet long with a further 2 or 3 foot long tail, they're a nocturnal species that sleeps during the day in trees and emerges at night to hunt for prey on the forest floor. Covered in thin fur which has gray, brown, and black patches and stripes that almost look like clouds, their long tails give them extraordinarily good balance, which means they can run vertically down a tree trunk head first at just a moment's notice. Normally solitary animals, they also have powerful legs that allow them to jump 4 feet high from a standing start, and they've been seen to effortlessly leap between tree branches over huge distances. Unfortunately, despite there once being large populations of snow leopards, a combination of habitat destruction along with hunting and their capture for zoos around the world has meant they are now in sharp decline in the wild, with fewer than 10,000 thought to exist. In some regions, they're now completely gone, and while efforts have been made to protect them and breed them in captivity, it's beginning to seem like a losing battle, and it may not be long until it's no longer possible to see them in their natural habitats. Number 11. Mandarin fish. If you swim around a healthy coral reef, the chances are you'll see countless vibrantly colored fish, but there's one that's found in the Pacific Ocean that's leagues above the rest, the mandarin fish. Growing to just 3 or 4 inches long, they're found in the warmer waters between Japan and Australia, and because of their incredible patterns were named after the robes that were once worn by the respected members of Imperial Chinese society. They feed on small crustaceans, so even though they live on reefs, they're usually bottom dwellers and are very difficult to spot. They're quite unusual in the way that the blue pigment is actually present within the cells of their skin, whereas most other fish either have it in their scales, and this has happened because mandarin fish don't actually have scales, and instead protect themselves with a thin layer of smelly and foul-tasting slime, which probably deters predators from trying to eat them. Unsurprisingly, they become very popular in the aquarium trade, with owners looking for some magic to add to their tanks. But mandarin fish are renowned for being an extremely difficult species to look after because of their precise dietary requirements, namely the fact they'll normally only be happy if they have access to live food. Number 10. California red-sided garter snake. You may not immediately think of a species of snake when considering the most beautiful animals in the world, but the California red-sided garter snake is far from ordinary. As the name suggests, it's a species that's native to western North America, and it has some of the most stunning coloration and patterning of any species. When they reach adulthood, they're normally between 20 to 40 inches long and usually have a red body that's broken up with a series of blue, yellow, and black stripes and blotches. What's particularly special about this species is that the colors are usually much bolder than you'll find with other snakes, and their normal habitat of marshes and coastal areas means they're normally covered in water, which along with sunlight only serves to accentuate their hues. They don't pose any risk to humans and only hunt small animals like rodents and amphibians. But because of the way they look, they've been a popular target for hunters and collectors. This, along with increased habitat destruction, has meant their population numbers have drastically reduced over the past century, and they're now classified as an endangered species. Number 9. Lilac-breasted roller. There are countless stunning birds across the African continent, but if you're in the sub-Saharan region, in countries like Namibia, Botswana, and Tanzania, you may well get the chance to see one of the most beautiful of all, the lilac-breasted roller. Growing up to 15 inches long, including their tails, this species can most often be found perching at the very tops of trees, and using this vantage point to survey the land around them in search of lizards, scorpions, snails, and rodents that they can prey upon. The lilac-breasted roller is one of the most colorful birds in the world, with the instantly recognizable lilac chest feathers that they're named for, which are surrounded by shades of green, brown, blue, white, and red. The reason they look like this is mainly for mating purposes, with the ones with the most vivid colors being the first to be chosen as partners. Just because they look cute doesn't mean they're friendly at all. However, because they're also known as being an extremely aggressive species when they need to be, they'll do everything they can to defend their nests, including attacking raptors and other birds much larger than themselves. And because they put up so much of a fight, they're usually successful in deterring predators from reaching their precious eggs. We're constantly adding more people to the Top 5's production team to bring you all the best content. Be sure to subscribe with notifications on and hit the like button. Number 8. White tiger. As the largest species of wild cat, tigers are some of the most majestic creatures in the world. But while most take on the characteristic orange coloration with black stripes, there are some that are even more special. Occasionally, a tiger is born with leucism, which means that its coat doesn't produce any orange pigment at all and is white instead, but still with the black stripes. These white tigers are extremely rare and are thought to be born once every 10,000 births. With an estimated 3,000 to 4,000 tigers existing in the wild across the Indian subcontinent at any one time, it's something that only happens once every 2 or 3 generations. Leucism happens because of a predictable genetic defect, however, which means that in captivity the trait can be bred, and because white tigers are in such high demand for zoos and performances, there are now believed to be around 300 of them worldwide. This is an ethically dubious thing because it can result in unhealthy inbred animals, especially as there's also demand for stripeless white tigers, something that's even rarer and more difficult to achieve, and means far more tigers are bred in captivity than there should be. Despite the concerns, there's nothing quite as amazing as seeing a naturally born white tiger, and it's one of the most spectacular creatures the natural world has to offer. Number 7. Glass-winged butterfly. Butterflies are fascinating insects and seem to exist in virtually every color and patterning you could possibly think of. But there's one species that's unique amongst all of the rest, the glasswing. Native to tree-covered regions across South America, they don't rely on large spots on their wings to mimic the eyes of predators or clever color combinations to help blend in with their surroundings. Instead, large parts of their wings are completely transparent, which means it's substantially more difficult to spot them wherever they may be. You might think that this would mean glass-winged butterflies are quite fragile, but they have a surprising amount of strength in their wings, so much so that they can actually carry objects that are up to 40 times their own weight. Normally growing to just over an inch long, with a wingspan of more than twice that, glasswings also have an unusual set of behaviors compared to other butterfly species, including the way that they can migrate over a distance of up to 12 miles each day to change their environment and purposefully eat toxic plants throughout the entirety of their lives to give themselves an obnoxious taste to further deter any potential predators that have managed to see through their disguise. Number 6. Peacocks. Whether to attract mates or to deter predators from attacking them, various species of birds have developed elaborate displays of color. But there's perhaps none as impressive and beautiful as the peacock. There are actually 3 distinct species: the blue peacock that's native to the Indian subcontinent, the green peacock that's evolved in Southeast Asia, and the Congo peacock that comes from the Congo Basin in Africa. Each species has slightly different colorations, but apart from that, they're virtually identical. It's only the males that have the huge, vibrant feathers, thought by Darwin to be a display to put on to attract females to mate. With larger and more colorful the feathers, the more appealing the individual is. It's now believed that the tail feathers are actually a sign of health and fitness, because for an individual to survive with such a huge mass of feathers would surely mean they have to be healthy and able. Green peafowl are the largest of the 3 species, typically growing to as much as 10 feet long, including their tail feathers, which can be 5 or 6 feet long. And despite the weight that comes with this, they're able to fly for extended periods of time and are most often seen in the air. Unfortunately, due to the beauty of all 3 species, they've been hunted for thousands of years, and along with recent habitat losses, their numbers in their natural environments continue to dangerously plummet. Number 5. Sand cat. What do you think is the cutest breed of cat? Surprisingly, there's a species of wild cat that's native to the deserts of northern Africa and the Middle East that would give any domesticated breed a run for its money, and is called the sand cat. Growing to 2 or 3 feet long, including their tails, they have sandy-colored fur that helps them camouflage in the surrounding environment, and everything they do is intended to keep as low a profile as possible to avoid any other scavengers. They're fairly solitary animals and live in underground dens where they sleep during the day and hunt at night. While their main source of food comes from rodents and birds, they've also built quite the reputation for being able to effectively kill venomous snakes without putting themselves at risk. As they move through the sand dunes, they keep their stomachs as close to the ground as possible and are able to achieve short bursts of speed up to 25 miles per hour when pouncing at prey or evading predators. They travel a large distance each night, with some studies showing they'll cover 6 or 7 miles before returning to their burrows, which they rarely build themselves and are instead ones that have previously been abandoned by other animals like foxes or large rodents. Number 4. Panther chameleon. Native to regions around the northern coast of Madagascar, panther chameleons are one of the most beautiful species of lizard you'll find anywhere on the planet. Typically growing to around 7 or 8 inches long, they're most famous for their ability to change color. But rather than being able to camouflage in with their surroundings, there are many more factors that determine a chameleon's appearance. The first is probably where it's been born and grown up. Known as locales, this is probably the biggest influence in a chameleon's color, which will be predominantly blue, red, green, or orange. Further to this, the animal's mood, the ambient temperature, and intensity of light will cause them to change too. And rather than being able to turn into any color, there's only a set range that each individual can replicate. If pale blue isn't in this range, for example, then it'll never be able to create that color, no matter how helpful that would be. Other features that are impressive about panther chameleons are their specially adapted toes, which help them firmly grip onto branches, and of course their lightning-fast tongues. In some individuals, the tongue inside their mouth can be as long as their entire body, and it's always ready to snap into action. They're able to fire them forwards at the equivalent of 26 body lengths per second, which means the tip of the tongue has normally snared prey within 0.003 of a second, giving it no chance of being able to escape. Number 3. Fiery-throated hummingbird. Hummingbirds are amazing creatures in the way they can flap their wings so quickly they're able to hover in the air. But the huge amounts of energy they burn up in the process means they need to constantly feed on the energy-rich nectar of flowers. This means they only usually live in areas with plenty of plant life, and normally take on vibrant colors to fit in with their surroundings. This is exactly the case with the fiery-throated hummingbird, a particularly vibrant species that are native to the forests of Costa Rica and Panama. Growing to around 4 or 5 inches long, they're covered in a stunning plumage that looks just like it's dark green from most angles. But when the light strikes it just right, a beautiful display emerges. With a bright blue crown, patches of violet throughout, and the bright red throat surrounded by a yellow that they've become famed for, it's almost unreal watching them fly from plant to plant. Surprisingly though, they're also quite an aggressive species that dominate every other type of hummingbird, and will fight off anything else that encroaches upon their territory. Not only is this to prevent anything from getting too close to their eggs, but also to ensure there's plenty of nectar around for their daily needs. Number 2. Red panda. Native to areas throughout the Himalayas and southwest China, the red panda is a small cat-like species that spends most of its time in trees in search of birds, eggs, flowers, and bamboo to eat. Despite their name, they aren't closely related to giant pandas at all, but there's controversy around which animal is a true panda. Red pandas were discovered and given the name first, and giant pandas were named after them because of the visual similarities. Red pandas, though, tend to only grow to around 2 or 3 feet long and are covered in reddish-brown fur. They're much more closely related to weasels and raccoons than anything else, and have a number of similar traits and behaviors to those species, but from a biological standpoint actually exist in a classification of their own. When they were first discovered, they were described as being the most beautiful animal in the world, and are definitely still up there in the rankings to this day. Unfortunately, however, like their giant namesakes, the population numbers of red pandas are also struggling, and there's now believed to be fewer than 10,000 individuals in the wild as a result of habitat loss and hunting. Number 1. Blue glaucus. You wouldn't normally think of a slug as being one of the most beautiful animals in the world, but the blue glaucus is no ordinary slug. There are actually 5 different species that are known by this name, each of which is found in a slightly different region, but otherwise is virtually identical. Classified as a type of animal called a nudibranch, they grow to around 2 inches long and spend their lives floating at the surface of the ocean, upside down. Because of their blue coloration, this allows them to be virtually invisible to any other animals, which is useful when there's so much out there that would probably be quite happy to eat them. The problem is, this is a bad idea, and if you ever see a blue glaucus, it's highly advised that you only look at it from a distance and definitely don't try to pick it up. That's because they have a rather unusual food source of their own, siphonophores like the infamous Portuguese man-o'-war. The slugs are immune to the potent venom of the man-o'-war and actually collect and store it in the tips of their finger-like structures to use as their own defensive measures. They can then sting anything that gets too close with a more concentrated dose of the venom, and in humans, this can quickly lead to extreme pain, nausea, vomiting, heart conditions, and potentially even death. Still, despite the dangers they pose, there's no denying that with their vibrant colors and unusual shape, They're one of the most stunning creatures in any ocean. Watch our Animals playlist for more top 15 videos about animals. Sit back, relax, and binge watch all of our best animal-related videos.